gospel has been known to cut through barriers. I don't know if you know that or not, but it's very, very true. I want to just recall where we've been in Acts, because we had Palm Sunday and we had Resurrection Sunday, and so we've sort of been out of the flow of Acts. So we're in the middle of Acts 10, and we did sort of end at an awkward spot. So recall where we've been in Acts 10. In verses 1 through 8, we meet a guy named Cornelius, who is a Gentile centurion. He's a Roman soldier who has a true love for God, but he really doesn't know about Jesus yet. So God sends an angel to him during prayer, and he is told to send to Joppa for a man named Peter, meaning the Apostle Peter. In verses 9 through 23a, Peter then has a vision during his time of prayer one afternoon. God shows him a sheet full of foods that were a big no-no for Jews to eat because of what was written in the law of Moses. He is told to kill and eat these animals that he sees on this sheet, but Peter actually refuses to do that 3 times. Shortly after this, 3 men come to him from Cornelius, and then the Spirit tells Peter to greet the men and to go with them. That's where we pick it up today, picking it up in Acts 10:23, second half of verse 23 there. And we enter into a continuation of the developing situation. So number 1 on your outline, if you like to take notes, is continuation. Continuation. The action moves towards Cornelius' home. Verse 23 says, on the next day he got up and went away with them, and some of the brethren from Joppa accompanied him. So these 3 men had come to visit Peter. Peter let them spend the night at the place he was staying, and then he goes with them the next day, and he takes some of his own people with him to go back to Caesarea to meet this guy named Cornelius. By the way, that's a picture of Caesarea, if you're wondering. So they're on their way to go meet this guy Cornelius. Verse 24 says, on the following day he entered Caesarea. Now Cornelius was waiting for them and had called together his relatives and close friends. The group arrives in Caesarea. Cornelius has his family and good friends already gathered, ready to hear what Peter has to say. Cornelius and his group are waiting anxiously. At this point, there is an immediate correction that takes place. So that's number 2 on your outline, correction. Cornelius gets carried away, but Peter sets him straight. Verse 25, when Peter entered, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet and worshiped him. So consider what Cornelius has been through. You might think, what is he doing, worshiping some man? Just consider what he's been through. He's a guy who loves God as best as he can. He prays to the God of the Jews. He ministers to the Jewish people. And then one day he is visited by an angel. The angel tells him to send for Peter. And so when Peter shows up, he's a little cranked up about all that has happened, and he bows in homage to Peter. But Peter is not having any of it. Verse 26, but Peter raised him up, saying, stand up, I too am just a man. So Peter knows that he is not a god to be worshipped. He wants that clearly understood. He helps Cornelius up, and then Peter's correction is not, Peter corrects him, but it's not a harsh or mean-spirited type of correction. It's just something Cornelius needs to understand. You know, it's very clear that, no, you don't worship me, you don't worship idols. We worship God. We worship God truly. So Peter will start by testifying about how his own mind had been changed about all this. So number 3 on your outline is change. Peter explains how God has worked on his heart. Verse 27, as he talked with him, he entered and found many people assembled. So Peter walks into this large crowd gathered in Cornelius' home. Verse 28 says, and he said to them, so this is Peter speaking to them, you yourselves know how unlawful it is for a man who is a Jew to associate with a foreigner or to visit him. So it was considered improper for Jews to associate with non-Jews, especially to eat with them or to go into their homes. That was a big no-no in that culture. You just didn't do that. Darrell Bach writes in his commentary on Acts, and I quote, it says, the concern was that a Jewish person would become unclean during the visit with a Gentile who had contact with unclean food and other types of uncleanness from the viewpoint of the Torah. Some contact was allowed, but to eat and visit, as Peter does here, was prohibited. So Peter is really crossing a boundary here. He's saying, he's doing something that just was not done in that time. Peter continues in verse 29. He says, that is why I came without even raising an objection. I'm sorry, I skipped a verse. Back to verse 28. Sorry about that. Back to verse 28. The second half says, is Peter speaking, he says, and yet God has shown me that I should not call any man unholy or unclean. So how has God shown Peter this? It goes back to the vision he sees earlier in Acts chapter 10. Let me just reread that to you to refresh you. Just read right through it. Acts 10, 11 to 15. This is what happened to Peter. So Peter is up on the roof of this house. He's praying, and then this happens. He sees this vision, and it says he fell into a trance in verse 11. And he saw the sky opened up, and an object like a great sheet coming down, lowered by four corners to the ground. And there were in it all kinds of four-footed animals and crawling creatures of the earth and birds of the air. A voice came to him, Peter, get up, kill and eat. But Peter said, by no means, Lord, for I have never eaten anything unholy and unclean. And a voice came to him a second time, what God has cleansed, no longer consider unholy. So that's what he's referring to here. That's what happened to him. And remember last time we were in this passage, I was talking about that a little bit and saying the reason that we don't have to follow the dietary laws laid down in Leviticus 11 is because God has now declared those things clean. It's right there. That's what happened with Peter. So he says, don't call anything unholy or unclean that I have cleansed. So getting back to the flow of Acts 10 here, God tells Peter the formerly unclean foods have now been declared clean. And this directly relates to Peter's visit to Cornelius' home. Peter now understands the point of the vision. That whole vision that God gave to Peter about that sheet coming down had a point. Peter now understands that point, and he understands that it's bigger than just food. It's really bigger than just food. It's about offering a relationship with God to people beyond just the Jewish people, okay? Now, we all sit here and we're probably like, well, yeah, I knew that. But back then, that was the issue. It was like, okay, God did choose the Jews, and he had this long history with them. But now we see that God always had this intention, and he wanted to move that relationship with him beyond just the Jewish people. And so that's what's going on here. That's why he gave Peter that vision. Verse 29, Peter continues, that is why I came without even raising any objection when I was sent for. So I ask, for what reason have you sent me? So Peter is no longer arguing with God about this point, which is a good thing. He now wants to know why he's been sent for. Now it's Cornelius' turn to answer. So Peter the Jew and Cornelius, the Roman centurion, are engaging in a healthy communication here. In fact, that's number 4 on your outline, communication. Cornelius recounts his vision for Peter. This is pretty much just recounting what's said in Acts 10, 1 through 8, so I'll go quickly through this, but I would like to read it. Verse 30 says, Cornelius said, 4 days ago to this hour I was praying in my house during the 9th hour, and behold, a man stood before me in shining garments. We know that man was actually an angel. So 4 days have passed since this had happened with Cornelius. And we learn here that the angel appeared in these shining garments. Verse 31, and he said, Cornelius, your prayer has been heard and your alms have been remembered before God. So Cornelius' prayer and his acts of charity were a reflection of his true service to God. And God saw that he had the right attitude, and the gospel was sent to him. Isn't that interesting? He didn't know fully about Jesus yet, but he was trying to serve God as best he can. And what happened? God sent someone. God took drastic measures to make sure that he heard the actual message of Jesus Christ so that he could believe on Jesus and be saved. Verse 32, therefore, this is the angel. This is Cornelius recounting the angel speaking to him. So the angel says, therefore, send to Joppa and invite Simon, who is also called Peter, to come to you. He is staying at the house of Simon the tanner by the sea. This simply echoes what was said earlier in the chapter, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. Verse 33, he says, "So I sent for you immediately, and you have been kind enough to come." So Cornelius acknowledges Peter's kindness in coming there. And then he goes on and says, "Now then, we are all present here before God to hear all that you have been commanded by the Lord." So this is a total open door here. Anybody who's ever been interested in sharing the gospel with someone dreams for something like this to happen, where someone's like, "Hey, tell me all that you know about God. Tell me everything you think about God." It doesn't happen very often, but everybody hopes for that. Like, I wish someone would just sit down and say, "George, tell me how I can know Jesus Christ," or "Tell me how I can be saved." It doesn't happen that way very often, but I wish it did. So Peter is like, "Go ahead, Peter." Cornelius is like, "Go ahead, Peter. What do you have to tell us about God?" You can see that Cornelius' heart is ready to receive the gospel. He's eager to hear it. He's like, "You know what? I know that God sent you. I want to hear everything that you have to tell me about God." So Peter is going to preach a little message there, and we'll read that next week. But he's going to preach to them the gospel, and he's going to share Jesus Christ with Cornelius and those in his home. So I'm going to stop here and just ask the question, so what? As I sort of tried to sum up what's sort of one of the main ideas here, I came up with this. God makes absolutely crystal clear that he wants the gospel to reach past various barriers that we human beings set up. God even removes a barrier that he previously set up in order that the gospel can move forward. Isn't that interesting? I mean, God did say in Leviticus 11 to the Jews at that time, he said, "Don't eat these things. I want you to be separate from the nations." So you can't deny that, but yet God at this point actually removed that particular barrier because he wanted the gospel to be able to move forward. I want you to consider two things here. I don't know how well coordinated these two ideas are, but I did my best. Like I said, I was struggling last week. But the first one that came to my mind was Peter's change of heart. That's number one on your outline, Peter's change of heart. Let me read to you Acts 10:28 one more time. It says, and this is Peter speaking to Cornelius about what he's been shown. He says, "You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a man who is a Jew to associate with a foreigner or to visit him. And yet, God has shown me that I should not call any man unholy or unclean." You know, it takes a big man to let his mind be changed like this, doesn't it? It takes a big man. I mean, you think about this. I mean, the barriers between Jews and Gentiles was something that Peter had known his whole life. It was all he knew. That's how he rolled. That's how he lived. That's normal. That's the way life is supposed to be. And yet he allows this experience with God to change his heart on that. In fact, Peter, did you know, would continue to wrestle with this in days to come. It didn't just go away that day. I mean, he took care of it that day, but he continued to wrestle with it. We won't go there, but Galatians 2:11-13, if you want to look that up later, we see that Peter went back and forth with this a little bit. He vacillated. Sometimes he went back into that mindset of, "Oh, I'm a Jew. I can't associate with these Gentile people. I can't eat with them because I'll become unclean," and all this stuff. So it was something he had to wrestle with in his own life. But it really still took a lot of guts to go to Cornelius' house that day. Big no-no for a Jew to do that, but yet he did. He allowed what God had said to change his mind. So my only idea here is I wonder if we're open enough to allow God to change our minds about some of the barriers that we put up. I just wonder if we're open enough to do that. So I want to encourage you to allow God to change your mind, okay? If there's something, some attitude, some idea you have that you're holding to, and God is telling you something different, you need to let go of that thing and trust God. You need to go with him. You need to go with what he says. Peter here was arguing with God. When you go back into the earlier part of Acts 10, he's like, "Okay, Peter, kill and eat." He's like, "No, I'm not going to do that." But he knows this is a vision from God, like directly from God. If God is saying it, then you need to really consider that. So Allow God to change your mind. So that's Peter's change of heart. That's what jumped out to me. And then the other thing that jumped out to me was this idea of the great equalizer. Number 2 on your outline, the great equalizer. One of the things I love about the Bible is that it is no respecter of our little pet peeves. For example, we've got in our culture dozens of news sources, some on the left, some on the right, some pretending to be the objective middle voice. We've got everyone freely spewing their opinions all over social media. We've got talk radio. Now, many of the talking heads in our world have an axe to grind, and sometimes it may be a legitimate concern. I don't deny that. There's a lot of legitimate things to think about out there. Yet when I turn to the pages of Scripture, I notice that it tends to cut right through all that. You ever notice that? Like you start reading the Scriptures, you start praying, and you realize, wow, there is something bigger going on than all of that stuff. It reminds me that the human family is all in the same boat. At the end of the day, we are all in the same boat, no matter what perspective or whatever you come from. We're all in the same boat. Now, I think it reminds us of that in at least 2 ways, so that's what I'm going to go with today. So there's 2 ways that the Scriptures remind us that we're all in the same boat. One is a little bit negative, so we're going to start there, and the other is positive. The first one is what I call universal sin. Universal sin. One of the things that's true about any human being, of any race, of any culture, of any viewpoint, is that we are all sinners. Why did Cornelius need to hear from Peter? Because he needed to know that Jesus had died for his sins. The Scriptures remind us that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23. I quote that one a lot, so you're probably sick of hearing it. But Paul actually makes this point in Romans after stringing together several passages from the Old Testament. He indicts the entire human race. So in Romans chapter 3, that's what Paul is doing. He's saying, look, nobody is really free and clear and righteous and holy before God. Every single one of us stands guilty before God. And so he dips into the Old Testament and he strings together all these passages from the Old Testament, and he just kind of strings them together. A lot of them are from the Psalms. Some of them are from a few other passages. But listen to what he says. And this is Paul's indictment of the entire human race. There is none righteous, not even one. There is none who understands. There is none who seeks for God. All have turned aside. Together they have become useless. There is none who does good. There is not even one. Their throat is an open grave. With their tongues they keep deceiving. The poison of asps is under their lips. An asp is a poisonous snake, in case you didn't know that. Whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their paths, and the path of peace they have not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. And Paul is saying that of the whole human race, of all of us. Think about this for a minute. Let me just ask some questions. Can you really say that you are righteous in your own power, like really, truly righteous? Do you seek God continually, all the time? Have you always done what is good? Have you ever lied to someone? Have you ever cussed someone out? Have you ever hurt someone just because you wanted to? Do you always show reverence for God in all that you do? If not, ladies and gentlemen, that makes you a sinner, a member of the human race in need of God's forgiveness. I like the way Ecclesiastes 7:20 sums up this idea. It says, "Indeed, there is not a righteous man on earth who continually does good and who never sins." Boy, isn't that true? It's a basic idea there. There isn't really one. There's no one that really does what is good all the time. All have sinned. Lots of people have loved to sing the virtues of equality over the years. But here's an interesting aspect of equality that doesn't brought up a lot, right? I mean, equality is a good thing. Equality is a good thing. But the sin problem is something that also makes us equal with one another, right? We all have this universal problem that affects us all. So we humans like to divide ourselves for various reasons. The only division, though, that's really going to matter in the end is the division of saved and unsaved. All of the ways that we divide ourselves is going to mean nothing on the day of judgment. Nothing at all. It is saved or unsaved. What have you done with Jesus Christ? What have you done with the provision that God sent, the Savior Jesus Christ? Did you get your sins, which we all have, forgiven by surrendering to Jesus in faith? That will be the only dividing line in humanity at that point. So we're all in the same boat. And that's the negative side of equality with one another. I know that's a little bit of a bummer, so I'm going to end on the more positive side of it. The Bible is the great equalizer in a second way. I call this the Imago Dei. So that is spelled as two words. I-M-A-G-O is the first word. D-E-I is the second word. And it's a Latin term which means image of God. Image of God. Though Peter was a Jew and Cornelius was a Gentile, they shared in this thing that we call humanity. That's what's going on there. This thing that we call humanity, they shared it all. They shared that with each other. Though all have sinned, it's also true that all humans have been created in God's image. Genesis 1:27 says it. God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. This is perhaps one of the most important teachings in all of the Bible. It touches on everything that we humans get all worked up about. Let me give you some examples of this. Sometimes there's a lot of controversy associated with this, but this concept of the image of God is so totally important, and it applies to so many different things that we wrestle with in our world today. Let me provide a few examples. Abortion. You ever thought about this? Like, what is the real problem with abortion? What is the issue? What is the core problem there that we pro-life type people really are concerned about? Here it is. That little baby growing in the womb is an image bearer of God. They like to pump it out to us like it's just a medical procedure. It's like having a mole removed or something. Well, there's a problem with that. A mole is not an image bearer of God. But that little child growing in the womb is. That's a whole separate human being there. So that's an image bearer of God. Here's another thing that's come up a lot over the years, racism. Racism. Have you ever thought about this? Like, what is the real problem with racism? Here it is in one sentence. That person of a different race is also an image bearer of God. That's really the problem with it. And so you have that. And just, by the way, white people are not the only people guilty of racism, okay? I grew up in a very multi-ethnic community, and I saw it coming from a lot of different sides. And not everybody was that way, but there were a few, and there were a few on every side of that thing that acted that way. But these are image bearers of God. We are all part of the human race and the human family. We all have equal dignity and honor before God because of that. And that's really the problem with racism. Here's another big controversial issue, transgenderism. Yeah, the image of God actually touches on this as well. Transgenderism. What is the problem with transgenderism? Here it is. God's image has been differentiated by male and female. It's not a choice. It is biologically determined. And this is one of those areas where both the theology coming from the Bible and science itself totally align with one another, okay? And the image, or the idea is, if you read Genesis 1:27, listen carefully. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. And then what does it say? Male and female, he created them. So even the scriptures back up what actual science says, or maybe you could say science backs up what scripture says. But that's the problem with it. It's that image of God issue. The image of God is actually differentiated by God's design between male and female. So the best thing we can do is to lean into that. Not sit there and go, well, I want to be something else. I want to be something in between. It just doesn't work like that. One more issue, pornography. Pornography. The image of God has something to bear on pornography as well. What is the problem with pornography? Here it is. It dehumanizes people, treating them like products rather than the image bearers of God that they are. Now, full disclosure, I was exposed to pornography at a very young age. And it was a bad thing, and it sort of warped my view for many years, okay? I'm so thankful that I stumbled upon the Scriptures, that I stumbled upon God, because He taught me a different way. Guys, especially guys, I know there's some women that do that stuff too, but if you are into that right now as I speak to you, I cannot tell you how much it's going to do for your spiritual life if you just stop looking at that stuff. You've got to somehow figure out a way to keep your eyes off of it completely, because it will stifle your spiritual walk totally. It'll mess it up. Your spiritual walk will not be anything near what it should be if you're doing that stuff all the time. So guys, I urge you very strongly. And again, the problem with it dehumanizes people. It treats people like they are products rather than these vessels worthy of honor and dignity that God created in His own image. So indeed, the Imago Dei applies to many hot-button issues of our day. Many of these issues would vanish if people really believed in the Imago Dei. All these issues, I could name probably a dozen more if I wanted to, but I didn't want to go too long on this. Seriously, though, if people took this idea of the Imago Dei seriously, a lot of these things would just vanish. Because we would have the right attitude and the right heart toward one another. We'd realize, hey, you are special in the eyes of God. I'm special in the eyes of God. You know, we are all people that though we are all sinners, we're also specially created in God's image. There's a certain dignity that goes simply with being human. Here's what it means. It means that human beings have dignity and value just by virtue of being human. Did you know that? We have a special dignity and value just by virtue of being human. Guess what that means? That means even the bad ones. Oh, that's hard. I know. That's hard to take. But even the bad ones. Even the person from the other political party. Ooh, I know. Don't throw anything at me for that one. Here's one. Even the insane jihadist who wants to blow you up. Yeah, even that guy is created in the image of God. Now, we may fight the agendas of these and others, and maybe we should. I wouldn't say we shouldn't. But let's also grant that they are human beings created by God and that He loves them. And maybe, just maybe, God will bring some of them to their own change of heart, like Cornelius had. Imagine if Peter would have just stayed totally just without bending into his mentality there. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go do what you're saying to share the gospel with this unclean Gentile. Imagine if he had that attitude. I mean, I suppose God could have sent someone else, and maybe He would have, but that was Peter's job to do that. God said, no, I want you, Peter, to cross that barrier. I want you to go there and share the gospel with this guy. I want you to be the one to push my message of the gospel beyond just the borders of the people of Israel. So he did that because God brought on that change of heart for him. I guess all I'm saying today is maybe it's time for some of us to have a change of heart. Maybe that change of heart is to change our mind about Jesus. Maybe someone is listening to me who has never trusted in Jesus. And I'm going to come down to the front and invite the worship team to come up and have a prayer with you along those lines if that's something you need to do.